Hello and welcome everybody to the High Return Real Estate Show. And today we got a great show. My name is Jeff Schechter, aka Shecky. I'm here with my amazing business partner, Mr. Jack Gibson.
Hey everybody, welcome back.
And today we've got kind of an interesting title that you probably saw called The Tropical Beaches of Indiana. And I know it's a pretty unusual title, but you're probably asking yourself the question, are there really tropical beaches in Indiana? Well, no, not really, but there is something very interesting going on that can allow you to experience any kind of tropical beach you want or any kind of lifestyle that you want. And today we're going to really let you in on some secrets about Indiana, most specifically what's happening in Indianapolis. That's going to really, really change the way that you think about your investments. So welcome everybody, and the question that I want to ask you is, what kind of lifestyle is important to you? All right, people invest and do different things with their money to create a certain lifestyle. Now, whether that's travel or freedom or the ability to be creative, that's really what we're talking about today, and that's what the connection is to Indiana, because we have found some things here that just really are not replicatable anywhere else. And so, Jack, why don't you talk a little bit about this?
Well, yeah, and I think, Shecky, the big question that we all have to ask ourselves is, what kind of lifestyle are we looking to create? You and I are at definitely at different stages of life. I've got young children, ages 6 and 8, and my priority is simply to have as much free time carved out to be able to watch my boys grow up and be there with them. Whereas, you are, what's the word, seasoned?
Be nice now.
All right, sorry. So you want, experience, you want travel, beaches, yoga retreats, right? Those are kind of the things you've told me that you're looking to do. So depending on, where you're at and of course your stages of life, goals and such, what you're, really enjoy doing, that's going to determine what does a great lifestyle look like to you. And Shecky, you put, a footnote here about me wanting some badass cars. I do like nice cars, but that is not at the top of my priority list by any stretch. They end up just costing too much in insurance, and they don't drive well in the Michigan winters. So,
yeah, understood.
Well, most people, you want some sort of freedom, really. I think that's what it comes down to. You want to be able to have a passive income coming in each and every month so that you have the time to really pursue your interests, hobbies, creativity, and you cannot fully become who you're meant to be, unless you actually have your financial house in order. So the key to that, everything revolves around, in terms of lifestyle, of having passive residual income.
You bring up a really, really good point, Jack, and that, what really stands out to me is that word creativity. And I think that, and there's been a lot of studies done about this, but people that are under any kind of financial stress or are working just to make a living and spending a lot of their time just creating income, I'm talking about the non-passive type, do not have the brain power or the bandwidth available to fully actualize and fully realize who they are meant to become, right? And not to get necessarily all woo-woo on you, but from a standpoint of once that is taken care of, and I'm not even necessarily talking about like gargantuan sums of money. I'm just talking about where you know that your basic expenses are paid, whether it's your rent or your house payment, car payments, groceries, just the normal everyday things of going through life. Once that's covered with passive income, right, that opens up a whole lot of channels in your brain for further creativity, and opens up a lot of possibilities for you to do more and different things, and honestly, really truly become the person that you were meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely, Shecky, fully concur. So what we want to talk to you guys about is what's going on in Indianapolis. What are the conditions there that's causing this to be a great place to invest? A lot of investors are, I guess the word would be flocking, to this part of the country because the conditions are so ripe and they don't exist anywhere else in the country. Shecky, we got, there's a long list of qualities here, but I think top of the list, the top two for sure, are the incredible price to rent ratios and very, very low property taxes, capped at 2% for the investors.
So quick question for you, Jack, just for clarity for the listeners. Describe exactly what you mean when you say price to rent ratio.
Well, I'll give you an example. Right around the corner from my house, I have a single family rental, for years. This is my starter home. And I purchased it, purchased it for around 130. I'm probably into it for about 150,000. That's what it's worth today.
Yeah.
20 years later, they don't always appreciate. So
yeah,
you can't bank on appreciation, in your rates of return by any stretch. At least that's, our model and philosophy. If it happens, it's great. But, so this one, $150,000, if you were to purchase it, and it's got a, 2-year lease in place for $1,500, right? So that means it's got 1% of the price of the property to the monthly rent ratio. Whereas in Indianapolis, we're experiencing a lot of times very close to, or even in some multifamily cases, 2% or even right around that area. So, for example, if I bought the same property and put the same amount of money into $150,000 into Indianapolis, I'm going to get $3,000 in rent in a lot of cases. Maybe depending on whether you get single families or, you're getting duplexes or quads or whatnot. That's huge. That makes a difference right there.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point too, in that 1%, it seems in the investor world, is kind of like that. It's like the golden egg, that's what everybody's really trying to achieve. And, when we start seeing some things that are approaching 2%, people are really, really blown away. Including ourselves, obviously, when we first discovered this. So it's just amazing what's going on here. And I agree with you when you combine that with the ridiculously cheap property taxes here comparison. I mean, like just one state over in Illinois, it's a whole different story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me in Michigan, this property, it's almost like 4%. It's almost double for the same, property valuation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other interesting things going on in Indy, and I know you got more you want to say, so go for it.
Well, yeah, this is a very, very steady, stable growth city. It's not a super fast appreciating type of city like what you're going to see on the coast or, like in, Florida, California, but, steady 2, maybe 3% per year. It's one of the cities, interestingly, Shecky, that dropped the least amount in 2008 and 2009 out of any area in the country. Dropped a very, very small percentage compared to where, other areas.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go up a lot, but it doesn't drop much either. And that's just simply because it's of the economic situation in Indianapolis. It is so the basic thing that people have got to understand is that this is one of the hubs, central locations in all of the U.S., within 700 miles of nearly 70% of the entire U.S. population. So logistics, shipping, transportation, that's huge there. And that can never be outsourced. So you're not going to see those jobs. They're not ever going to go to Mexico. They're never going to get shipped overseas because you simply can't outsource logistics. So that's what keeps the economy so stable and just steadily, growing along with the U.S. economy.
Yeah, I kind of liken what you're saying to really the turtle that wins the race. It's it's not necessarily going fast, but it's just rock steady. And there's some really, really big employers in Indianapolis. Obviously, Eli Lilly is a major employer here, and the medical and more specifically biomedical is huge in Indianapolis.
Lucas Oil Stadium, that's where the Colts play. They have Super Bowls there. There's all kinds of sporting events and concerts, and that employs thousands and thousands of people with solid jobs that again will not be sent overseas. And it's also 13th largest city in the U.S.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah, and so we love it obviously because we're seeing great returns, but one of the biggest reasons we're seeing those returns is because of the specifics of Indianapolis. Like, we could know what we know and do what we do and find what we find and rehab what we rehab in any other place in the country and still not get the same returns.
Right. You could take this exact same model that we utilize in Indianapolis and, we're not going to be able to touch what we're able to touch, here. There might be, maybe a handful of other markets that are close, but we haven't seen anything that is, like neck and neck comparison. And just to make sure everybody's clear that's listening that, this is a very, very strong cash flow producing market. When you buy these, buy properties in this market, you're following the Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I hope you guys have all read that book. If you haven't, grab a copy immediately. That book is huge. I'm sure many of you have read it. And the model that he described in that book is so applicable to Indianapolis. It's buy a property for the immediate cash flow return that you get today versus buying, praying, and hoping that it goes up and appreciates, in a year or 2 or 5 or whatever years from now it is. So you're definitely, you're buying so that you can get a secondary or maybe a third or fourth stream of passive income that can help to, again, back to the lifestyle conversation, create that ultimate goal that we all have is to live the lifestyle of our dreams.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to just kind of segue into, a lot of the listeners are going, well, yeah, that's great, but I don't live in Indianapolis. And I would say that, probably 99% of the listeners to this show are not necessarily residents of Indianapolis. And obviously we have investors from all over the world, right? And they certainly will invest in Indianapolis. And it brings up this great other point is, how can you actually court a good deal? I liken it really to a really good, I'm a single guy, so let's kind of always like to frame things in terms of dating, but let's talk about the long distance relationship, right? So how do you have a good long distance relationship, right? Well, it's really, really based on trust. And that trust comes from previous performance, from reputation, right? And we alluded to it earlier, but this happens as a result of not only being in a great city and operating in a great city, but because of certain systems that are in place, which we're not going to talk about today. That's obviously a subject for another podcast. But I do want to explain to the listeners that it's very, very possible to have a successful long-distance relationship because of the things that are in place, because of the trust that's in place, and because of the systems that are in place, and because of the area in which we invest, right? So I know, Jack, that you, this is a perfect time for you to talk about a little bit of your experience when you were first looking at Indy. I know you had experiences outside of Indy, and I know you talked about Michigan, things like that, and my experience was was really the same too. I mean, I had other investments, and most people that know me know I spent a lot of time in Texas, in the Austin and San Antonio areas, and had properties in those areas. And especially when the crap hit the fan in 08 and 09, I mean, I basically got my ass handed to me.
Right.
And so it's a very, very different experience investing in Indianapolis than anything I could ever do in San Antonio. And I was in San Antonio for a long time and knew that city really well and knew where to find the deals and was really, really well connected. And no matter what I did as far as my previous investments, I could never even come close to replicating what I've been able to do in Indy. So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I'm grateful for these other investments I did, because they make me appreciate what we have in Indianapolis all much more.
Yeah.
I wish that I didn't have to go through that, right, to arrive to this point where, the bulk of my portfolio is now centered around Indianapolis. But yeah, I mean, a great example. I purchased a property in Arizona. I thought I was purchasing told I was purchasing at a steep discount. The property is all in after rehab and such is around $80,000. It appraised for $90,000. So got a little bit of equity there, but I'm only getting, $700 in rent. So It's very, very thin. And it also, it took almost a full year before I actually started to receive a rent check. The first 5-6 months were the rehab, which, took longer than projected or what I was told. Then it took 3 or 4 months to get a tenant in place. And then once the tenant got in, the water heater broke, they discovered termites. So all that delayed my first rental payment for a year. And so that's a tough situation. And one of my passions is, I started as an investor myself. And then through a great experience in Indianapolis, I started sharing this, success, because I was hoping to help other people avoid all the headaches that I went through. And I got a lot more of those kind of stories in Arizona, but we don't need to go into those today, Shaq.
Yeah, and lessons well learned. And obviously, for those who don't know, one of the people that Jack shared this success with was me. And I am eternally grateful for that. And because it really made a huge difference in my life and brought us to being where we are today. So I really appreciate that. But so let's talk about next podcast, because a lot of people are curious about this sort of long distance relationship, and that's going to be the subject of what we talk about next. And the reality is, and the big question that you're probably asking is, can you actually have a system for bringing the right deals to you, for bringing the right deals right to your doorstep? And the answer is yes, but there's only one way. Because we've seen a lot of different ways to do this, and we see a lot of people that are doing this wrong. And there has to be 3 things in place. I call it a perfect trifecta. And that's what we're going to be covering in the next High Return Real Estate show. So, please come join us for that. And if you want to find out a little bit more about some of the stuff that we're doing in Indy, I would encourage you to just check out the website. So go to highreturnrealestate.com. There's a very, very obvious tab on that website called Properties. And on that tab, you will be able to look in great detail at some of the properties that are currently available in Indy. So I welcome you to do that. Anyway, that's it for today. And Jack, really, really appreciate you and your insights as always. And thank you to all the listeners that show up. And we really appreciate you. And we will see you next time.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening.